If houses could gossip, McRaven House in Vicksburg would spill enough tea for centuries. This old southern home has seen frontier bandits, Civil War soldiers, and reclusive grandmas. And it has the ghost stories to prove it. Nicknamed Mississippi's most haunted house, McRaven isn't just a single home. It's 3 houses in one, stitched together over different eras like an architectural Frankenstein. Each section comes with its own style, its own story, and yes, its own resident spirits. Today, we're taking a light-hearted ghost and history tour through McRaven's colorful past. So grab a sweet tea, holy water optional, and step inside, if you dare. The front door opens, by itself perhaps, and we enter a dim foyer. Don't mind that sudden chill. It's probably just the air conditioning. Probably. Our tour begins in the oldest part of the house, where a notorious character set the stage for McRaven's mystique. Our first stop is a small brick room with rough-hewn floors and the lingering scent of blueberries. Year 1797. This humble room was the entirety of McRaven House back then. It was built by Andrew Glass, a man who, let's say, had an alternative approach to wealth management. Legend has it Mr. Glass was a highwayman, the polite 18th century term for roadside robber, who preyed on travelers along the Natchez Trace. Basically, if you were journeying through the Mississippi frontier with a fat purse, Andrew Glass was the reason you double-checked your pistol. He built this 2-room hideout as his personal bandit lair, complete with a clever security system, a removable ladder for the upstairs loft. Each night he'd pull up the ladder behind him, ensuring no sheriff or angry victim could sneak up for a midnight arrest. Home security circa 1797 was a bit more rustic than Ring doorbells, but hey, it worked. Take a look at the walls. That faded blue-gray paint isn't just old, it's literally edible. The plaster was mixed with buttermilk and blueberries, an old DIY paint recipe that has oddly stood the test of time. Interior decorators take note. Farm-to-wall paint was a thing. In this very room, Andrew Glass counted his ill-gotten loot by day and slept above the kitchen by night, likely with one eye open. It's easy to imagine him creeping to the window at every rustle outside, clutching a pistol, ready to defend his stash. The atmosphere still carries a touch of that paranoid energy. Now about Andrew's exit from the story. It was as dramatic as his entrance. The details are murky, but one popular tale claims that Mr. Glass met a surprising and untimely end courtesy of his own wife. As the story goes, Andrew came home one night in bad shape, perhaps from a robbery gone wrong, and his wife, fed up or fearing capture, decided to hasten his journey to the afterlife with a straight razor. Yikes. Whether it was jealous revenge or a twisted act of mercy, Andrew Glass's demise in the late 18th century marked the first ghost of McRaven House. Employees and visitors have whispered that Andrew's spirit never left these rooms. Tour guides often caution, especially the ladies in the group, that Andrew's ghost has a cranky streak. He's been known to bang doors, toss objects, or push a spectral keep-out vibe that sends shivers down the bravest investigator's spine. In fact, some staff insist they don't like to be alone in this room, as if a surly, invisible bandit might be glaring at them from the corner. But fear not, our tour has only just begun, and there are friendlier phantoms ahead. As we leave Andrew's pioneer quarters, mind your step and watch your pockets. Old habits die hard, and who knows if ghostly highwaymen can resist a shiny watch. Now we move forward a few decades, and McRaven is about to get a wholesome makeover, courtesy of the law. Climb the narrow staircase. Yes, you can use the stairs. Andrew's ladder is long gone. We emerge into a hallway connecting to a refined dining room and bedroom added in 1836. Gone is the rough frontier vibe. In its place, we have touches of early Victorian elegance. This was the work of Sheriff Stephen Howard, who bought McRaven and decided to civilize our little bandit hideout. Think of it as a home renovation reality show, the lawman versus the outlaw's lair. Sheriff Howard enclosed a former back porch to create this very hallway and elegant staircase. He added a proper dining room, because even in haunted houses, Southerners need a place to serve collard greens, and an upstairs bedroom with a breezy balcony. The architectural style here is Empire period, simple lines, some ornamental flares, a sort of dignified 1830s upgrade. The sheriff was turning McRaven into a suitable home for his young bride, Mary Elizabeth Howard. For a short while, the Howards brought warmth and domestic bliss to McRaven. Picture the sheriff hanging his hat after a day of keeping Vicksburg's peace, while Mary Elizabeth arranged flowers in that room to your right, the dining room, and perhaps fussed at the dusty old furniture Andrew Glass left behind. Under the Howards' care, the house was finally becoming a family home. But, as any veteran ghost tour goer knows, happy times rarely last long in a haunted house timeline. Tragedy struck in late August 1836. Mary Elizabeth died tragically in childbirth right here in the new upstairs bedroom. She was only around 15 or 16 years old, a young life suddenly cut short. Sheriff Howard was devastated. Local lore says he was so heartbroken that he couldn't bear to stay in McRaven after her death. He packed up and left Vicksburg altogether, seeking less painful pastures. It's a poignant footnote in McRaven's history. One moment, a loving couple building a future. The next, an empty house once again, now with the gentle ghost of a young mother lingering in the halls. Ah yes, Mary Elizabeth's ghost. Unlike Andrew's grouchy spirit, Mary is known as the friendly hostess of McRaven. Many visitors have reported curious phenomena in her old bedroom and the adjoining nursery area. Don't be alarmed if you feel a light tug on your sleeve or a faint whisper near your ear. Mary just wants to say hello. People describe her presence as playful and sweet. Tour guides like to tell the story of the time a heavy wooden wardrobe door slammed shut on its own during a tour. It gave everyone a start, but they quickly blamed Mary having a bit of cheeky fun. Some have seen the apparition of a young woman in a white dress gliding along the upstairs landing or gently peeking out from behind a doorway. Others have felt a cool, comforting touch when standing in her old bedroom, almost as if Mary is reassuring them. One guide swears that on a quiet afternoon she saw an impression on the neatly made bed, as if someone had just sat down on the mattress. Naturally, no living person was in the room at the time. Perhaps Mary Elizabeth was taking a moment of rest, enjoying the view from her bedroom one more time. Mary's personal belongings are still in the house, displayed as they would have been in 1836. Her brush, her mirror, maybe even the crib for the baby that never got to grow up. These artifacts seem to tie her spirit here. But far from being a terrifying ghost, Mary comes across like the friendly neighbor who pops by unexpectedly, albeit from beyond. She has even been heard, on ghost hunting recordings, humming a lullaby or softly speaking. One famous EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, captured at McRaven features a woman's voice commenting, "That's a funny old clock." A ghost with a sense of humor about the decor? That's Mary Elizabeth for you. In a house full of restless spirits, Mary's is the gentle soul that balances the scales. Now, as we tiptoe out of the Howard wing, give a nod and a thank you to Mary. It's only polite to greet the lady of the house. We're headed into the grandest part of McRaven, a wing that will take us into the mid-19th century and the tumult of the Civil War. Keep your lanterns close. Things are about to escalate. Behold the parlor as we step through this next doorway. High ceilings, ornate plaster cornices, and a majestic flying spiral staircase twisting up like something out of Gone with the Wind. Welcome to 1849, when John H. Bob, a wealthy brick manufacturer, bought McRaven and decided to transform it into a true mansion. Mr. Bob added this Greek revival section, the lavish parlor we're standing in, a formal front entry, a grand master bedroom upstairs, and that elegant curved staircase that was the envy of Vicksburg high society. The house's facade was refitted with tall columns, called Vicksburg pillars, and a stylish porch where Bob could smoke his cigars like a proper Southern gentleman. If the earlier sections are a time capsule, this wing was the fancy gift wrap. By the 1850s, McRaven House was one of the finest homes around, seamlessly blending frontier practicality with antebellum splendor. However, you know what's coming. The 1860s in Mississippi were anything but peaceful. The country plunged into the Civil War, and Vicksburg became a crucial stronghold on the Mississippi River. During the siege of Vicksburg in 1863, McRaven House found itself on the front lines of history. The city was besieged by Union forces, cannons thundered day and night, and citizens dug caves into hillsides to survive the onslaught. John Bob, his wife Selena, and their young family sought shelter in the basement of this house as cannonballs whistled overhead. Upstairs, the once elegant rooms turned into a scene of wartime horror. McRaven was commandeered as a field hospital for Confederate soldiers. Try to imagine it: wounded men lying on parlor couches and dining tables, surgeons frantically operating, with no anesthetic beyond a swig of whiskey and a bullet to bite down on. In fact, dozens of spent bullets with teeth marks were later found in the yard, grim reminders of those makeshift surgeries. Blood stained the floors. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear. By the time Vicksburg fell, it said that as many as 25 soldiers had died on McRaven's grounds, hastily buried out back in a makeshift grave. So if you feel an oppressive heaviness here in the parlor, or see a fleeting figure in a ragged uniform by the window, you might be brushing past one of those long-departed soldiers still standing guard. Visitors occasionally report seeing ghostly Civil War soldiers roaming the property, spectral sentries who never got the memo that the war is over. You might catch a whiff of phantom cigar smoke, perhaps General Grant stopping by, or hear the faint clink of phantom spurs on the hardwood floor. The house was literally under fire, yet it survived. The scars of shrapnel were later found in the attic beams during renovations, a testament to McRaven's tough spirit and maybe a bit of luck. Astonishingly, John Bob and his family made it through the siege alive. One imagines them emerging from the basement after the surrender, blinking in the sunlight, the house around them battered but still standing. But John's story doesn't have a happy ending. In 1864, the war was technically over in Vicksburg, but Union troops still occupied the city. Tensions remained high. Mr. Bob, an ardent Confederate at heart, was not exactly gracious in defeat. One fateful day, he found a group of Union soldiers from a U.S. colored infantry regiment lounging in his garden, possibly picking blackberries or just taking a shortcut. Bob was not having it. This was his property, and he saw them as invaders. So in a fit of outrage, he did something rather foolish. He picked up a brick, when in Vicksburg, do as the Vicksburgers do, and hurled it at the soldiers. That brick struck a Union sergeant right in the head. The sergeant, understandably not amused, decided to return the favor with something more effective than a brick. He raised his rifle and shot John Bob on the spot, right here on his own land. Depending on who tells the tale, Bob either died instantly from a bullet to the head or shortly thereafter from wounds. Either way, our proud mansion builder met a violent end thanks to his notorious temper. Talk about throwing the first stone and paying for it dearly. John Bob thus joined McRaven's roster of restless spirits, People say his ghost still strides angrily along the upstairs balcony, perhaps reenacting his final tantrum or guarding his beloved home from trespassers even now. Late-night visitors have claimed to see a tall, shadowy figure glaring down from an upper window when no one is upstairs. Others on the lawn have heard a sudden thud as if a brick dropped nearby, only to find nothing there. Mr. Bob might be doomed to an eternity of replaying that fatal encounter, forever the disgruntled host who wants those darn soldiers off his lawn. On guided tours, it's become tradition to give a polite wave toward the balcony, just in case John is watching. Maybe he'll wave back, with or without a brick in hand. With John Bob gone, his widow Selina understandably did not wish to stay in a house full of bullet holes, buried soldiers, and memories of her slain husband. She sold McRaven in 1869 and left for the safer and hopefully less haunted confines of family in New Orleans. McRaven House, however, was not about to retire quietly. Up next were owners who would take the mansion in a very different direction, inward. As the Victorian era rolled on, the house would become home to an unusual family with their own secrets, turning McRaven into a virtual time capsule of eccentric living. Ready to meet the Murrays? Fast forward to 1882. McRaven House, now weathered from war and time, is purchased by William Murray, a local brick entrepreneur. Bricks, it seems, are a running theme in McRaven's destiny. William moves in with his wife Ellen and eventually their 7 children. For the first time in its life, McRaven becomes a bustling household filled with the laughter, chaos, and occasional crying that comes with so many kids. The Murrays modernized a few things here and there, but largely they left the historic sections intact. In a way, they just added their own layer to the time capsule. Picture the scene around the turn of the century. The parlor that once housed wounded soldiers is now hosting family suppers and Christmas mornings. The walls that echoed with cannon blasts now resonate with piano music and children's footsteps. Perhaps the ghosts of Andrew Glass and John Bob sighed in relief as the house settled into relative peace. For several decades, McRaven was almost just a normal family home. Almost. The Murray family, though, had their share of hard times under this roof. William Murray died in the house in 1911, apparently of natural causes in his old age. Ellen, the matriarch, passed away here in 1921. Some of their adult children remained in the house and started to adopt a quieter, increasingly isolated lifestyle. By the mid-20th century, 2 of the Murray daughters, Annie and Ella, found themselves as the last keepers of McRaven. Neither sister ever married. They had lived in this house their entire lives. As the world sped into the age of automobiles, radios, and Elvis Presley, the Murray sisters simply shut the door and stayed in the 1800s. They famously refused to install electricity or plumbing in McRaven. Who needs light bulbs or hot baths when you have ghosts to keep you company, right? The sisters relied on oil lamps for light, a wood stove for cooking, and a good old outhouse out back. The only concession to 20th century convenience was a single telephone line, which they used sparingly to call their doctor. The townsfolk whispered about the eccentric spinsters in the haunted house down the street. Some probably thought the sisters were as spooky as any ghost. 2 aging women peering out from behind tattered lace curtains, living in a decaying mansion frozen in time. And decaying it was. By the 1950s, McRaven had fallen into serious disrepair. Ivy vines crawled up the walls and in through broken windows. Whole sections of the yard grew wild and jungle-like. Neighbors might have forgotten the house even existed behind all that overgrowth, if not for the occasional sight of the Murray sisters shuffling out to the porch or the groan of an old floorboard carrying on the night air. Annie and Ella carried on their solitary existence among the dusty antiques and memories of a happier past. They even burned pieces of the antique furniture as firewood to keep warm in winter. A desperate measure that surely made any antique dealer who later heard about it shed a tear. Now, dear tour guests, we come to one of the most morbidly fascinating episodes in McRaven's lore. It concerns the Murray sisters' brother, Harry Murray, a former state senator. By the 1950s, Harry had long moved out, but in his final years he returned to Vicksburg and, when he died, his body was brought to McRaven for an old-fashioned wake in the parlor. In those days, it was still common for families to hold a viewing of the deceased at home, so the sisters, set in their Victorian ways, cleared off a table in the very parlor you're standing in and laid out Brother Harry's coffin. Well, actually, local legend says they didn't have a proper coffin handy. They may have used a door taken off its hinges as an impromptu platform for his body. Talk about DIY. Townsfolk and dignitaries came to pay respects to the late Mr. Murray in the grand, if faded, setting. When the wake was over, one would expect a hearse to come and take the dearly departed to the cemetery. But the sisters forgot to arrange the rest of the funeral. You read that right. Whether out of grief, confusion, or their increasing disconnect from reality, Annie and Ella simply left Harry's body in the parlor. Days passed, weeks passed. 6 weeks in total, poor Harry remained in state in the middle of the room. By the time someone thought to check on the sisters, legend credits their doctor with finally making the gruesome discovery, Harry was well on his way to becoming a ghost himself, if you catch my drift. The overdue burial was hastily taken care of after that, but one can imagine the lingering energy such an incident left in the house. To this day, guides say you can still feel a chill in the parlor around the spot where Harry's coffin sat, and some claim the ghost of a well-dressed gentleman occasionally appears by the parlor door before promptly vanishing. In fact, many say the entire Murray clan haunts McRaven now. Over near the staircase, a kindly older man in a turn-of-the-century suit has been seen, likely William Murray, still checking on the household. A lady in a long, dark dress with her hair in a bun sometimes shows up in the kitchen, perhaps Ellen Murray still minding the domestic duties. Annie and Ella themselves, those two recluses, are rumored to roam the halls together, keeping an eye on any modern improvements they surely disapprove of. The most mischievous is old Harry. It's said Brother Harry's spirit loves the parlor doors. Tour guides have found the heavy double doors thrown open in the morning, even when they were sure they closed them the night before. If you try to shut them, don't be surprised if they dramatically fling open again as soon as your back is turned. Harry's ghost simply insists on an open-door policy. Perhaps he doesn't want to be forgotten in that room ever again. By 1960, the saga of the Murrays had come to an end. Ella Murray died in 1960 at age 81, right here in the only home she'd ever known. Her sister Annie, then utterly alone and in her 70s, finally moved out, likely into a nursing home. One imagines her leaving McRaven for the first time in decades, locking the door and whispering a fond goodbye to all the spirits she'd lived with, both real and supernatural. For the first time in over 100 years, McRaven House stood completely empty. It was a decaying relic, nearly consumed by vines and rot. In fact, it was so well hidden by neglect that locals later admitted they had no idea an antebellum mansion was tucked away in those weeds. It could have ended there, McRaven collapsing under its own haunted weight, destined to be an ivy-covered ruin where teenagers dared each other to spend the night. But McRaven wasn't done telling its story. Not by a long shot. Just when it looked like McRaven might fade into oblivion, a knight in shining pickup truck arrived. In 1960, a preservation-minded gentleman named O.E. Bradway purchased the decrepit property. Where others saw a haunted money pit, Bradway saw a piece of history worth saving, ghosts and all. He cleared out the invasive jungle of vines, performed structural repairs, and dusted off enough cobwebs to clothe an army of Halloween skeletons. By 1961, he opened McRaven House to the public for tours. For the first time, everyday people could legally snoop around this old mansion and marvel at its layered past. Imagine the astonishment of those first visitors, stepping from room to room and effectively traveling from 1797 to 1836 to 1849 in a matter of feet. National Geographic even featured McRaven in a 1963 article dubbing it the time capsule of the South. They were struck by how each room was preserved as if its original owners just stepped out for a moment. Never mind that some of them stepped out a century ago into the afterlife. Subsequent owners in the 1970s and 80s continued the restoration work with great care for historical accuracy. One owner, the Harvey family, even found original 1840s carpeting samples and had reproduction carpets made so the parlor would look exactly as it did in John Bob's time, bullet holes not included. They painstakingly repaired war damage in the rafters and shored up sagging balconies, perhaps giving John Bob's ghost a sturdier railing to lean on. McRaven House was slowly coming back to life, in the living sense, while never losing its supernatural population. In fact, opening it to tours only seemed to increase the ghostly antics, almost as if the spirits were tickled to have new audience members to spook. During restoration, workers would leave for the night after tidying their tools, only to find the tools mysteriously scattered by morning. Lights that had been installed would flicker and blow out with no explanation. One contractor swore he heard someone humming a lullaby in an empty room. Our guess, Mary Elizabeth, offering her approval to the refurbishments or maybe gently teasing the electrician. Over the years, McRaven gained national fame as a haunted hotspot. It has been featured on TV shows like A&E's Haunted Houses, The Travel Channel, and was even investigated on Ghost Adventures in 2018. Those ghost hunters came in armed with all sorts of gadgets and left with plenty of spine-tingling evidence. The aggressive spirit of Andrew Glass made an impression by rudely poking and prodding at the crew. One of them claimed to feel a sudden pressure on his neck, perhaps a reenactment of that razor incident. The team also reported unexplained footsteps stomping across empty rooms and disembodied voices that barked back responses to their questions. Andrew, is that you glaring at these intruders with your 200-year-old grudge? Mary Elizabeth's presence was also detected, sweet perfume scents wafting through the nursery room and a gentle voice captured on tape saying what sounded like, "baby." The Ghost Adventures verdict. McRaven absolutely lives up to its most haunted reputation. Even skeptics have been won over, or at least left scratching their heads. In recent years, a CNN travel writer, a self-professed skeptic, spent the night in McRaven during a special ghost hunt. By dawn, even he admitted that some things defied logical explanation, like the sound of boot steps marching across the empty upstairs or the sudden aroma of pipe tobacco enveloping him in the dark. In short, McRaven's ghosts love an audience. And the feeling is mutual. Thousands of visitors now come every year, especially around Halloween, to experience that delicious shiver of history meeting mystery. Today, McRaven House is a carefully maintained museum by day and a ghost tour bonanza by night. In the daylight, you can appreciate the antique furniture, the architecture from 3 distinct periods, and the truly fascinating history that unfolded within these walls. You'll learn about frontier life, antebellum society, the Civil War siege, all the real history that makes McRaven a mirror of Mississippi's past. But once dusk falls, the lanterns are lit, and the ghost stories take center stage. Tour guides lead brave souls through shadowy rooms, recounting the tales you've just heard, and sometimes adding new ones as paranormal happenings continue to crop up. If a guide casually asks, "Did you just tug my shirt?" and you didn't, Well, check if Mary's ghost is smiling in the corner. Visitors might find themselves asking an empty room, "Is anyone here?" and getting a knock in response. Cameras malfunction at the juiciest moment. Orbs of light show up in photos where no light should be. On particularly active nights, folks have been known to flee the house before the tour even ends, only to laugh at themselves later on the safety of the sidewalk. McRaven seems to enjoy messing a bit with even the hardiest ghost hunters. And yet many people leave not scared at all, but oddly charmed, feeling like they've just visited with the spirited residents as much as the living history. Our tour concludes back on the front porch, beneath those stately columns that John Bob once proudly added. Look back at the facade. You're seeing layers of time, like ghostly reflections in a window. Behind those shutters and glass, Andrew Glass's wary eyes might still be peering from the old 1797 loft. Mary Elizabeth's gentle silhouette could be watching from the 1836 bedroom, humming to herself. John Bob might be glaring down with arms crossed from the 1849 balcony, making sure we don't trample his azaleas on the way out. And perhaps, just perhaps, a pair of elderly sisters in 1920s calico dresses are standing in the doorway, wondering who's going to shut off all these electric lights. Certainly not them. McRaven House stands as a rare and wonderful time machine, a place where history and folklore dance together. Its story is told with equal parts laughter and gasps. One moment you're chuckling at an eccentric anecdote. The next, you're feeling the hairs on your neck stand up as a cold draft drifts by. Through it all, the key to McRaven's enduring appeal is that every ghost story here is grounded in real events and real people who lived and died under this roof. The truth is often stranger than fiction, and in McRaven's case, it's also stranger than a whole lot of fiction out there. So, is McRaven House truly haunted? The evidence, historical and paranormal, certainly suggests that something unearthly lingers here. But haunted or not, one thing is for sure. McRaven is bursting with life, past and present. It's a house that survived bandits, bullets, and bayonets, only to open its doors and share a wink and a scare with anyone bold enough to walk in. If you ever find yourself in Vicksburg, you can take this tour in person. You'll walk through those eras, hear these stories, and maybe new ones, and perhaps even have your own close encounter with a former resident who refuses to fade away. Thank you for joining this little journey through McRaven's halls. As you step off the porch and back into the modern world, don't be surprised if you feel a tiny pang of nostalgia. Yes, even for a haunted house. After all, where else can you get a polite greeting from a ghostly lady, a scolding from a long-dead robber, and home decor tips from the Beyond All-in-One visit? McRaven House offers a uniquely humorous and haunting reminder that history is never truly gone. It's alive in every creak of the floor and flicker of the light. And sometimes, it even says hello.